Live and pre-recorded, this is the Red Ticket Blues Podcast. I am Brian Buckley. It is another edition of the Thursday Talk. You can always listen to the show on iTunes, TuneIn, Radio, Stitcher, YouTube, and follow me at BrianBuck13 and at Red Ticket Blues. This week we get a Boston perspective, a Boston feel. That's why we have Mr. Adam Kaufman, who is the morning drive sports anchor for WBZ News Radio 1030 AM, and a sports talk show host for 98.5 The Sports Hub in Boston, and he's also involved with Boston.com. So we go through a lot of the sports happening right now, even the ones that aren't, like the Red Sox. But I think we get a better feel of the city when you have someone like Adam Kaufman, who was born and raised in the Boston area. So let's get to it. All right, we welcome in the morning drive sports anchor for WBZ News Radio 1030 AM, sports talk show host on 98.5 The Sports Hub in Boston, and contributor at Boston.com. He is Adam Kaufman. Adam, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to.
Well, let's before we get into some topics, sports topics in the Boston area, tell us how it all got started for you and how you got involved in the sports media industry.
How much time do we have? My path was kind of a long and winding road with a lot of sort of different interesting stops along the way. There's no, I would definitely never tell. I love what I do, and I love all the different things that I do. For anyone out there who may be listening that may want to do what I'm doing, I would definitely say don't use my path as some sort of template. There's no, I don't think, right or wrong way to go about doing this. But for me, I went to Syracuse, majored in broadcast journalism there, graduated back in 2004 from the Newhouse Communication School. From there, I wasn't, 100% sold on what I wanted to do outside of knowing that I wanted to work in sports media. And I think, that's probably pretty common for a lot of people when they graduate college. You just need to kind of find out along the way and see what doors open, which ones you want to try and shove open. And what I did feel as though I wanted to do at that time, though, was baseball play-by-play, ideally television. I mean, really, if you were to boil it down, I wanted to be the next Sean McDonough, who, of course, not only well-known to Boston sports fans and across the national sports media, but also a Syracuse grad and somebody that I interned under when I was back in high school, and he was still with the Red Sox, so I got to know him a little bit. And really, that was the goal. I wanted to, before Don Orsillo came along, I wanted to, be that next voice of the Red Sox back then. And so my first job was in minor league play-by-play baseball in the Blue Jays organization in Auburn, New York, which is only about a half hour outside of Syracuse. Did that for a season. It was effectively an internship, one of those housing provided, food provided, furniture provided, but there's no real actual money. You're not saving. It's an experience job more than anything else. When that season ended, though, because it was effectively an internship, I moved back home just in time for the 2004 Red Sox World Series run. And from there was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Do I, want to commit myself to baseball, which means sort of find something to do until, the winter meetings and hope I can land a job for the next summer, or, long season, be it, that what I had done was short season single A. So whether it's long A or double A or, pipe dream triple A at that point, who knows? I wound up actually falling into hockey play-by-play. And I from there did that for many, many years. My first job in hockey was with the Motor City Mechanics, a now defunct team in a defunct league, the United Hockey League in just outside of Detroit, Michigan. I was there for a season. From there, I went down to Texas in the Central Hockey
all
League
over
with
the place
Amarillo Gorillas. Yeah, all over the map. From the Gorillas, I then went to Providence, moved back home. I'm from South Shore, Mass, but effectively Providence, or at least that was half hour from home anyway. And so the organization that I rooted for, that being the Boston Bruins, obviously the AAA team, the top feeder team. This was 2006. I got that job and started there with the 06-07 season. I was there for 5 years, and from there left in 2011 and found my way through some experience, some contacts, some things that I had done over the course of those handful of years into the Sports Hub 98.5 in Boston. That led to where I still am, hosting a talk show on weekends and also doing updates periodically, studio coverage for Celtics games as well. But that opened up a lot of doors, my experience there, be it to WBZ AM, where obviously I am full-time now, Monday through Friday, as a morning drive sports anchor, like you said before, but also writing for Boston.com, writing for CBS Boston for a period of time, doing TV at both Comcast Sportsnet New England and Nesson, hosting national shows on CBS Sports Radio. The list kind of goes on as far as things that I've been very fortunate to do. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but it was, like I said, it was kind of a long road, so it's tough to bullet point.
No, that's a lot of great information, and when you're on that many different platforms, you have one thing that you have in mind what you want to do, and that's, of course, to cover big sports news, big sports happenings. And in Boston, I mean, in the past few weeks, I don't think there's anything been, well, I guess that's questionable with the Patriots, but big news, the Boston Red Sox, after a disappointing season, has made several moves this offseason, including the acquisition of pitcher David Price for 7 years, $217 million, along with acquiring closer Craig Kimbrell and sending Wade Miley on his way. What are your thoughts on these moves from new GM Dave Dombrowski?
Well, I think what we've learned, anyone who may have been skeptical as to the impact Dave Dombrowski was going to have when he came in back in August and effectively replaced Ben Cherington, who, of course, walked away, and then Mike Hazen becomes the GM. But we all know, as you pointed out, the Dave Dombrowski, while his technical title is president of baseball operations, he is the GM.
Right,
I mean,
right.
They're one and the same. And so I've been impressed. I don't see how you can't like those moves. You go out and the Red Sox are an organization that is extremely successful. I know not as much on the field 3 out of the last 4 years, but with regard to the market and generating revenue. And so this is a team that's flush with cash. We're not talking about the Miami Marlins or the Kansas City Royals or, some of and even the Royals really aren't as small marketed team now as you would have said they were a handful of years ago. But this is a Red Sox team that can open up the wallet. It doesn't have to be restrictive of pitchers over the age of 30 and not being willing to go that extra mile for guys like John Lester at this time last year. They decided through a previous relationship, obviously, that Dombrowski had with David Price, having traded for him and traded him away when he was in Detroit. He knew him, and he knew that he would be a good fit in Boston. The pedigree, the years and years of dominance, not only in the American League, but specifically in the American League East. I know the postseason numbers aren't what a lot of people would like, but this is a guy who is, for a team that tried to convince us that it had 5 aces last year, and we all laughed at it, and it played out as everyone pretty much thought it would. This is a guy you can't argue. He is a bona fide number one starter in the American League, in all of baseball, and a guy who's been a Cy Young winner, twice a runner-up. He's going to lead this rotation. It's one of the reasons that Wade Miley became expendable. Now, he's not a guy that I necessarily would have wanted to trade away because he's young, he's affordable, he's left-handed, he's durable. I would have opted to try and move Clay Buchholz or Joe Kelly or somebody like that. But nevertheless, Miley goes, and this is, you're seeing what Dombrowski's doing. He said, when he came in, or at least the start of the offseason, well before the winter meetings, which are going on now, he had a few areas of focus. Get an ace, check, David Price. Get a right-handed hitting fourth outfielder with a little bit of pop, check. Chris Young, signs him as a free agent for 2 years and $13 million. And find a lights-out closer and solidify the back end of that bullpen. Well, check again. He goes and trades for Craig Kimbrell, gets rid of a few prospects, but Kimbrell under control for the next few years, a great strikeout per 9 rate, I think 14.5 for his career. Great numbers between Atlanta and San Diego, and someone who can take a lot of pressure off of Koji Uehara, off of Junichi Tozawa, and then they deal Miley, obviously, to Seattle and bring in Carson Smith, who was a rookie last year, 26 years old, but another flamethrower and a guy with great numbers. So I don't know if Dombrowski is done at this point. He sort of alluded to the fact that he thinks he is, but he has had a very successful offseason to this point, and, we're only a week in December, so who knows what's going to happen going forward.
With all these new faces in the clubhouse, and you just went through all of them with the checks and putting a new team together, so to speak, and I say this with jest, as I'm a Yankee fan since I was a child. Do you think David Ortiz is going to be able to deal with the fact that, the spotlight may not be on his retirement tour all the time this year?
Obviously David Ortiz is a guy that, there's a lot of ego there, and you can understand why, quite frankly, with how good a player he has been in such a gigantic baseball market. I mean, he has been front and center for a number of years. And even it's not like attention was taken away from him when Manny Ramirez was here, when Pedro Martinez was here. I mean, David Ortiz, if he goes out and does what he has always done, which quite frankly is unthinkable at 40 years old, but you look at what he did last year and the year before, and who's going to tell the guy he can't do it anymore? Then all the fanfare will continue to be there, be it at Fenway where it's unavoidable, and well deserved, by the way, or at at various stops along the road for a farewell tour. I don't like farewell tours, and quite frankly, and I am very much in the minority in this category. So I recognize that even just making this statement is stupid, but it's something I've talked about on the radio, so why hide from it now? I wouldn't be surprised if the guy doesn't walk away at the end of the year if he goes out and rakes again.
Wow.
If they have if they have a good year, make the playoffs, flirt with the championship again maybe, and he is out there with another 30-100 season or 35-100 season, and obviously gets enough at bats to vest that option for 2017, which that contract is already in place. If he reaches a certain number of at bats, which he will as long as he stays healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't walk away, if he says one more year, because he can still do it, and David Price is here and other guys are here, and why not ride off into the sunset? Now again, I'm in the minority in that category. He probably will walk away, but I just would you put it past David Ortiz to say, well, let's stick around, let's do it again?
I mean, that's a very interesting take, because I mean, you look at David Ortiz. You brought up the contract and the numbers that he has to hit for 2017, and Ortiz's career has been like a Richter scale. I mean, it goes up and down, and he's coming off a pretty good year. So I hadn't actually even thought about that. But what's to stop him? You're absolutely right. Switching gears here, I'll tell you, Adam, I love the NBA, but I have to admit, I really don't get into it until the NFL regular season is over.
Sure.
You're a Celtics guy. You host the Celtics at 7 show on 98.5 The Sports Hub every Saturday morning. If the playoffs started today, and yes, I'm saying if the playoffs started today in December, Boston is in at 12-9. So if you had to describe this team to someone who hasn't really seen them play yet, what would you say?
I would say be prepared to watch a team that is unified, that plays together, plays for one another, buys into everything the coach wants. It's not an offensive-minded team. It's a team that offense comes from defense. It's the DNA of this team, and the coach Brad Stevens and many of the players say it ad nauseum. It's the DNA of this team is defense. When the defense isn't going, then it's odds are they're not going to win that game. Whether you're talking about playing the San Antonio Spurs or whether you're playing the Brooklyn Nets or anything in between, they're a team that's going to go out and compete every single night, and they don't have any superstars. It's a team that, as I said, it does it together, and it's balanced. 1 through, I don't know, let's say 1 through 12 or 13. There's a lot of even talent there, with a couple exceptions, maybe a guy like Isaiah Thomas or Jared Sullinger, maybe Avery Bradley, but generally there's a lot of even talent on this team, but it's one that is going to be above all else entertaining. Now, is it built for a championship and to be a contender right now? No, absolutely not. But it is a team that I think most would agree that have been watching, that is most nights wildly entertaining to watch, if nothing else.
You mentioned buying into what the coach has to say. That coach, a young coach in Brad Stevens, and I think we're all familiar with his back-to-back Final Fours, coaching Butler a few years ago. From an outsider's view, like I said before, it seems like the front office and Boston fans in general have given Stevens a long leash when it comes to this team. Granted, it's only been a few years. First of all, would you say that's accurate? And second of all, if that's accurate, when do you think that leash ends?
Well, I think Celtics fans, maybe more than other fans of teams in this market, are very, very patient. And that's not to say they're just a happy to be here crowd, like, hey, I'm on the Jumbotron at the Garden, this is great. There is some of that for sure, but every fan base has that. But I think Celtics fans are, they're very smart and recognize that in the NBA, it's not easy to build the way that the way the salary cap is structured, the way the draft lottery is set up, the fact that obviously the Celtics in past years have had very, very poor success in the draft with regard to the lottery and trying to get top tier picks. More often than not, in recent years, they have been in the playoffs. Obviously, they had the great run during the new Big Three era that is now behind us. But now with Brad Stevens, Stevens is a guy that is universally beloved, I think, not only here in Boston, but across the NBA. I mean, he is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the next great young coaches in this league, and he's not even 40 yet. I don't think he's 38 or 39 yet. He's young. He's only a few years older than me and has accomplished much, much more. He's somebody that is just very even-tempered. I think you can look go back, I don't know, a decade or so, a decade and a half. You look at college coaches who made the jump to the NBA where it hasn't worked out, whether it's a guy like Rick Pitino or John Calipari, and we'll see what happens, obviously, in Oak City with the coach from Florida there.
Billy Donovan, yeah.
Right. There's a lot of ego in college coaches that have great success at the college ranks and come to the NBA and think all of a sudden that's going to immediately follow them and they're front and center. That's not the way it works in the NBA. In the NBA, it's stars and talent and players first, and the coach is in the background. There are exceptions, obviously, whether you're talking about a Greg Popovich or a Doc Rivers or Rick Carlisle or, a lot of these guys. But it's, it ultimately comes down to what you achieve on the court. And if it doesn't work out, what's easier in professional sports? The cliche is correct. It's always easier to get rid of the coach. If LeBron James last year, they made it in Cleveland, obviously, to the finals. They lose to Golden State, but they made it to the finals. And David Blatt, first-year head coach in the NBA, coming over from overseas, coaching all that success in Israel. If LeBron James, in his first year back with the Cavs, says, you know what, this was a great run, this was a lot of fun, but I didn't quite mesh with David Blatt. Well, you know what? David Blatt, 1 year in the NBA, getting to the championship, or at least to the finals anyway, he'd be out on his butt because star power wins. Now, fortunately for him and for LeBron, that didn't happen, and they're continuing to build. But where things are different in Boston, what I'm sort of driving at with this long-winded spiel is that there is no talent on this team that is bigger than Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens is the exception. He is the star of this team, and that is the view from ownership. That is the view from Danny Ainge, who, that's the reason they gave him a 6-year deal to grow right along with his players in this organization throughout this rebuild in the NBA. So getting back to your question, I don't think the leash is all that short for Brad Stevens, quite frankly. I think there's a patience there. There's an expectation this team will be able to really compete, for a championship sooner than later based on all of the assets Ainge has been collecting, be it in the form of draft picks or expiring contracts or trade exceptions or whatever else. But really, it's on Ainge to turn those into something, to allow those to materialize into the next great superstar in Boston. Because historically speaking, that guy isn't coming here in free agency. It's just literally never happened.
Your answer leads me into my next question. I don't have to remind Celtic fans that Boston has Brooklyn's unrestricted first-round pick for 2016, and Brooklyn is not a good team. We all know this. We watch them. We see this. And many people have visions of Ben Simmons from LSU in green and white. Now, do you foresee any situation where they would actually trade that pick? Is there sort of a number where the Celtics look at it and say, I'm not really happy where that may place, where the ping pong balls may put us?
Well, I'll tell you what, and it's a conversation I have with friends all the time, and obviously callers on the radio. It's a fascinating topic because there is literally no right answer. It's you could make the case, hey, hang on to the pick and hope it materializes and becomes a top 5 or top 3 or like you said, number 1, and you draft Ben Simmons and hope he works out and he's the next superstar. And by the way, DeMarcus Cousins or Carmelo Anthony or whoever you might acquire with that pick, they wouldn't have been a good fit in Boston anyway. So this is the route to go. The easiest way to rebuild is to do it through the draft if you get that guy. The flip side of that, of course, is what if you don't? What if you get the number 1? Ben Simmons is Greg Oden. It never works. He's hurt or he never lives up to the potential, like so many other guys who have been number 1 overall busts in the last 25 years. And DeMarcus Cousins would have been the key to expediting your pursuit of a championship. Or you say we're fixated on that becoming a number 1, and the Nets improve just enough for that pick to fall to like number 7, and you're drafting a guy who's not all that special, whoever it might be. There's no way to know. What I think is interesting is Wick Grossbeck, co-owner of the C's, was on the Sports Hub just last week, and he was asked that question. What would you like to do if obviously it's you trust in Danny Ainge as your he's not a GM in title, but he is the GM, similar to Dombrowski. You trust in Danny Ainge to do what's right for the franchise, so he's going to do whatever he's going to do. But if you, Wick, were to make the decision, what's your preference? What do you want? And he said he wants the superstar. He'd rather trade the pick. Let's move it in February and before the trade deadline and make things interesting. Let's get ourselves back to contention sooner than later. Let's not wait through the development of some young stars like a team like Minnesota is obviously doing right now with Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. That's a team that could be very, very, very talented in the next few years, but it's going to take a little while for these guys to turn their fairly consistent flashes right now into being all-world players, as it looks like they have the potential to be. So again, there's no right or wrong. I think it's a really interesting discussion. I think that Ainge is a guy who will listen. I don't think he's fixated on using that draft pick. I think if the right player's available, he's going to pounce, just like he did back in 2007 and when he moved the number 5 overall pick, which turned into Jeff Green for Ray Allen, and that was enough to convince Kevin Garnett that there was something really building in Boston, and stockpiled all of that talent that they had been occupying into a trade. They traded 7 guys away for Kevin Garnett, and all of a sudden, boom, you have a new big 3.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're a Syracuse guy, but bringing Carmelo Anthony, and anyone listening to this podcast knows that I am a certified Carmelo Anthony hater. That guy would just suck the life out of a young team. I think that would be one of the worst moves you could possibly make.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, and I won't ramble on about this, but I'm forever grateful to Carmelo for the national championship my junior year of college, his freshman year. It was a lot of fun. It was cool calling some of those games. I'm not a fan of the idea of him being in Boston either. I just unfortunately he's developed into such a player, and a very good player, but developed into such a player that I kind of I look at him and I look at a guy like Dwight Howard in Houston in the same prism, in that these guys, I just think by the time they retire, these are going to be 2 guys that never win a championship.
And listen, there's tons of egos in all sports, but I think these guys, those 2 that you mentioned, Carmelo Anthony and Dwight Howard, the numbers mean a lot more to them, personal statistics to them. Switching gears to the Patriots losing streak. Yes, a losing streak. When it comes to the receiving core, I mean, Brady's basically throwing to the practice squad at this point. Are there bigger problems than just the offensive injuries, or these last 2 losses, are these indicative of an actual breakdown in New England?
Well, I mean, I think you're being a little hard on what's left of the offense, in that, he has Danny Amendola back. He has Scott Chandler, who I know has not had a glamorous year, but he's still a guy with some talent. He showcased that in Buffalo. But obviously after that, and he has Brandon LaFell, by the way, who has not been very good this year, but went for nearly 1,000 yards last year. And Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman should be back in time for the postseason, at least according to all reports. So, the offense is going to improve. The offensive line, surprisingly enough, has been a mess because it's been as healthy as it's been all year the last couple of weeks, and has looked as bad as it has looked all year. It's really kind of confusing in a lot of ways. But go back a couple of years, that AFC Championship loss in Denver on that beautiful day where Peyton Manning went off. That day, Tom Brady was throwing to a practice squad. I mean, when he's attempting passes to guys like Austin Collie and Matthew Slater in a playoff game to determine whether you go to the Super Bowl, that's how you know there's a problem. But I think the offense will be fine. I think it'll figure it out. I think we in New England have very high expectations for this team, right or wrong. And I looked this up just yesterday because I was thinking about it, and I found the number to be fascinating. The Patriots have, as you said, they're on a losing streak, which doesn't happen. They've lost 2 games in a row for the first time since 2012, only the 5th time since 2002. They haven't lost 3 games in a row since 2003, which obviously they'll try to avoid Sunday night in Houston. But going back to the original point, 2 straight losses now for the first time in a few seasons. Do you know how many times teams in the NFL this year, we're through 13 weeks, this year have lost 2 straight games? 92. Think
That's
about
insane.
how spoiled Patriots fans are. 92. And obviously, simple math, you have 16 teams right now coming off of losses. So in Week 14, that list of 92 is only going to continue to grow by probably 8 or 9 or whatever it is. So it's just remarkable, the consistency, the level of success that team has had for not just clearly this year, but the last 15 years. But still, are they in a little bit of a predicament right now? Of course they are. They're not playing well these last couple of weeks. You lose consecutive games when you're leading by 14, especially this most recent one against a lousy Eagles team where, quite frankly, you invite the loss upon yourself by getting a little too cute in certain areas along the way. I think this Patriots team is going to come out with a vengeance in Houston Sunday.
There's some sports talk show hosts in Boston that think that after the Deflategate nonsense, that the NFL has, some sort of agenda that they're pushing at the Patriots through the refs, especially targeting Rob Gronkowski and potential offensive interference pushing. Any truth to those? Those people with those ideas, or are those just baseless conspiracies?
Well, I certainly couldn't tell you if there's any truth to it because there's, it's opinion,
right.
And unless, Roger Goodell or Dean Blandino or an official or, somebody like that comes out and says, yes, in fact, this is happening, then there's your truth. But that's not going to happen. Do I think it's baseless, though? No. I think that, I'm not going to leap to the NFL is definitively out to get the Patriots week in, week out. They're, when you, it's a little kind of troubling when people watch a game so closely that that it was actually a storyline after that Denver game that after whoever it was, I can't even remember, maybe C.J. Anderson had scored he scored the winning touchdown in Denver, but I don't remember if maybe it was the go-ahead touchdown before Brady's fourth quarter comeback in the final minute. Whatever the case, after Denver had crossed the goal line late in the game to go up on the Patriots, whichever touchdown it was, people were throwing a vine around Twitter of officials fist bumping after the touchdown, almost as if to say, like, great, Broncos are leading the Patriots. This is, and like stuff like that to me is stupid. I don't get wrapped up in that. But if you want to say Rob Gronkowski is being targeted by officials on offensive pass interference calls when the guy has had 6 flags against him this year, which is more than literally 29 other teams in the NFL, when his style of play has not changed, I don't think that's baseless. I think that's very justified. And as we saw on Twitter, Gronkowski seems to agree.
Yeah. Speaking of Boston sports media, we know it can be overbearing at times to ask any athlete, anyone who listens to it. In fact, for a population of a city, just a little over 500,000, there's 2 major sports stations in the city of Boston, WEEI and the Sports Hub. Is this overkill, or conversely, do you think a city like this, who's so rabid about sports, need more sports stations?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I think you could have a third sports station in Boston that would be successful if it had the right talent and the right rights, obviously, to games to get people to listen, because that's a big thing that the Sports Hub's success speaks for itself. Obviously, 5, 6 years, whatever it's been at this point, but at the beginning, to compete with EEI in an area where so many other stations had failed in the past, one, being on an FM signal obviously was crucial, but on top of that, having the Bruins and the Patriots right out of the gate was, something that was going to drive listeners your way. EEI for years and years and years refused to talk hockey. It, made a mockery of the idea of talking hockey. And so hockey fans flocked to the Sports Hub, to a group of hosts that were very willing and able and excited to talk about pucks. And that was something that was very helpful at the beginning for the Sports Hub. And now, building an audience, obviously, and so many shows with so much success and hosts who are so great that, all day parts and all days, but, obviously the emphasis is always going to be on Monday through Friday, and there's a lot of great people there that are doing very well. But then, you in addition to Patriots, Bruins, you add in the Celtics, you add in the Revolution, you add in some college football with the Notre Dame games. There are different things that, is kind of a little bit for everybody, and I think that success is, I don't need to spout off the ratings because everybody knows them. Things are obviously going well, but is there room for more? I think so, because it boils down to what a rabid, passionate fan base Boston is filled with overall for whatever the sport, and what exactly would it be like or look like or sound like if not for all of the success over the last 15 years? I don't know. I guess it would sound a lot angrier probably, but I don't think you'd have fewer listeners, or you'd have people that are disinterested. I think that, quite frankly, when teams aren't playing well, not that I root for that by any means. I'm a Boston sports fan, along with someone who works in Boston sports media. But I think when things aren't going well for teams, that makes for more compelling radio, because everything isn't rosy, everything isn't awesome. People are all the more frustrated and ticked off and want to spout off about.
Yeah, the proverbial fan on a ledge always makes for better entertainment than throwing roses at people. It goes without saying. You mentioned the success by a lot of the teams in Boston. You're a Boston guy, like you just said, you're a Boston fan of sports. I'm in Connecticut here, so I have my left ear, I hear New York, right ear, here I hear Massachusetts. So I think for a long time, the Red Sox were sort of the clear owners of the city of Boston. With the success of the Patriots over the last 15 years, have the Patriots entered that conversation, or is it still always going to be Boston Red Sox?
Well, the Patriots have more than entered the conversation. I would say right now they dominate the conversation. Part of that is the Patriots' dominance. Part of it is the overall dominance of the NFL, and that, a younger generation isn't necessarily as passionate about baseball as they once were. There are a lot of people that view baseball as a dying sport, a boring sport, an agonizing sport to watch because of how long it is and the fact that it's not timed. And so you can't depend on there being a 3-hour game or less like you can in the other sports. I'm not one of those people who thinks baseball's dying. I'm still very much a baseball fan. But the Patriots, with what they've been able to achieve, I would say they lead that conversation right now in terms of the popularity within the city. But part of it too is it's what have you done for me lately? You know what I mean? When things are going well for the Bruins, in that stretch of years when they win the Cup in 11, they get there again in 13 and fall to Chicago. There's Bruins fans are as passionate as they come to begin with, but when other people hop on the bandwagon when things are going well, this, you could argue turns into a hockey city more than anything else. Especially when things aren't going as well for the Red Sox like they haven't the last couple of years, and they kind of fade off into the background a little bit. Or when the Celtics during the new Big Three era, the Garden was rocking, man. So it's a lot of kind of what season is it and what team's playing well. But if you had to boil it down to, picking one team with all other factors being equal, it would be the Patriots right now over the Red Sox.
That's interesting. It's also, you mentioned hockey. I think that applies to a lot of the cities. You look at New York or Chicago. They may not be hockey towns, but when those teams are in a deep playoffs or in the Stanley Cup, it just sort of overtakes the city like no other sport. It's very hard to put your finger on it. But
well, to me, I mean, there's no. I'm a fan of all sports, and not as much soccer, but the four major sports, and there is no better postseason, no more entertaining postseason than the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's it's the only sport where it ratchets up to a new level for those couple of months where everything, not only means more like it does in the other sports, but that's clear. It's evident. The passion, the physicality, the speed, the work ethic, all of it. It filters through and it jumps off the screen at you. Or if you're there in person, you can feel the intensity. It's incredible. I mean, really, I would encourage anyone to, whether you have a dog in the fight or not, just sit back and watch the Stanley Cup playoffs for a postseason, and it's so much more entertaining than watching 8 teams or a dozen teams, compete to try and get to the Super Bowl, or the Major League Baseball playoffs would feel like they drag on forever, even with this extra wild card play in, and the NBA playoffs, which are exhausting. They last so long, and yet the Stanley Cup playoffs last just as long as the NBA playoffs, but there's so much more.
Yeah, I'm not even a hockey guy, but I usually do watch the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I just say, this is great. And again, I'm not even a hockey guy. Finally, I've spent many nights at sports bars in the Boston area, and regardless of the month, there's usually anti-Yankee chants or rhetoric. So here's my question as a Boston guy. With 3 World Series titles by the Sox in the last 11 years, has the hatred died down towards the Yankees, or is it still strong as ever?
I don't know if I guess you would say that the rivalry is definitely not what it was pre-2004. But I think a part of that is because these two teams haven't really been really great at the same time throughout a lot of those years. I think that if you had just for example, this upcoming season, if all of a sudden the Red Sox and Yankees are both great and they're fighting for a division crown or a wild card spot, or one team's going to make it and the other one's not, and there's 10 games left in the year and they're within a few games of each other and they've got a series coming up, whether it's at Fenway or in the Bronx, it's going to be as passionate as ever. I think it's not so much about the success of one franchise versus the other, and we know historically, obviously, that belongs to the Yankees, even if the Red Sox have the edge over the last decade or so. I think all the passion is the same when it really means something. The problem is just over the last dozen years or so, it hasn't meant as much, these head-to-head matchups after the meeting in the 03 ALCS and the 04 ALCS, and after after that, there hasn't really been anything of great significance.
And a lot of the cast of characters aren't there anymore. But I'm sure if both teams are competitive at the end of the season, and as long as Alex Rodriguez is doing something, whether it's be bad or good, there will be plenty of emotions because he is the lightning rod. I want to thank Adam Kaufman for coming on the Red Ticket Blues podcast. But before you go, Adam, to play us out, I have 3 quick questions for you. You ready?
Sure.
Does David Ortiz belong in the Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Do you believe the frozen envelope theory when it comes to Patrick Ewing and the 1985 draft?
Sounds like a Bill Simmons creation, right? No.
Okay. And what sports poster was on your wall as a kid?
Oh my goodness, a lot. But for whatever reason, the first one that springs to mind was I had a poster of Jason Kidd and Grant Hill back to back when they were with the Mavericks and Pistons respectively after they won co-rookie of the year back in 95 or whatever it was, and they were the bright next young faces in the NBA. Back in that time, and I'll be quick, but back in that time, I was big into like NBA inside stuff on the weekends with Ahmad Rashad and so I just big hoops junkie and all sports really, I guess, but I would say, that poster, Ken Griffey Jr. poster, I had a lot of posters on my wall for sure when I was growing up.
Adam Kaufman, he is the Morning Drive sports anchor for WBZ News Radio, 10:30 a.m. in Boston, sports talk show host on 98.5 The Sports Hub, and contributor at Boston.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam M. Kaufman, 1F, Adam M. Kaufman. And Adam, I want to thank you for being on the Red Ticket Blues podcast.
Pleasure was mine, man. A lot of fun.
So there you have it. There's Adam Kaufman, who a lot of great information that you may not know about the city of Boston and what's going on there sports-wise. I really like the David Ortiz theory. Like he said, he's in the minority. I haven't even heard that idea floated around that he would come back after his retirement tour. But would it really shock you? I don't think it would. But I really want to thank Adam for coming on. He was a great guest and just bountiful knowledge. And again, much appreciated to have him on. Remember, you can always listen to the show on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at BrianBuck13 and at Red Ticket Blues. And like the show on Facebook. And remember to leave a review wherever you're listening. If you're listening, then you need to leave a review somewhere. Come on, just do it. With all that being said, I'm out of here.